Morning, everybody. Today is Wednesday, April the 28th, 2021, and we are going to be talking about classifying shapes today. So we've talked about quadrilaterals, and we know that quadrilaterals have four sides and that they have parallel sides. Some have two parallel sides. Some have only one parallel side. And we've also talked about what polygons are. We know that polygons are shapes that have straight sides and they are closed figures. They do not have any openings. So today we're going to learn how we can classify other shapes. And just as a reminder, we talked about how we could describe groups of polygons. We've already discussed previously, like I said earlier, about quadrilaterals and polygons, and we can classify them by their attributes. We've learned about parallel sides, number of sides, the size of their angles. We kind of talked about a 90-degree angle, but we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, and whether or not they are convex or concave. So again, we're going to be thinking about all of these things that we've already talked about, and we're going to apply them to classify shapes in other ways. So let's take a look at these shapes. So we see different sizes and different ways that these three-sided shapes are made. Now we want to think about which ones could we group together. If we're trying to classify them and put them within groups, which ones could we group together? Which ones have the same angles? Which ones have that right angle that we've already talked about? So if we look at this one, we see that this is a right angle and it is a 90-degree angle. To be a right angle, it has to be 90 degrees. Sometimes we'll see little squares here to represent that 90-degree angle. So how could we classify these particular shapes? So again, we can look at the number of sides. We can look at the angles. We can look to see if any's parallel, which in this case, would there be any parallel? Because we've got to think about parallel are lines that go side by side, but they never touch. What do we notice about the lines in these shapes? Are there going to be any parallel lines? And hopefully you're saying no, because they're three-sided shapes and they're not going to have any lines that are parallel. But we're going to think about how we can classify these shapes. Now, again, we can put them in groupings because of the way that these three-sided shapes are made. We're going to look at those angles to determine whether or not they need to be grouped together. And at this time, I want you to think about what you're seeing on the screen. Now, I'm seeing some shapes that can go together, to be grouped together. But I want you to also think about, we can classify them just because of their side lengths as well. And in this particular case, with these shapes, we want to think about what is the greater thing we can call these. When we look at this shape, we immediately come up with a name. So these can be classified as another name. What name do we give for a three-sided shape? And hopefully everyone is saying triangle. All of these can be classified as triangles, but we can break them down into smaller groupings as well. So in this case, this triangle and this triangle can be grouped together. We have this triangle that is a right angle, but we don't have any other right angles. So this one's kind of going to be in a class by itself. Now, this triangle could also be classified with these two triangles. Looking at this triangle and this triangle, they're a little bit different. I'm looking at those angles, and possibly this one isn't going to work with this one, but it does work with this one. Now we've got to think too about how that shape is turned. This one is turned kind of crazy. So if I'm looking at this angle right here, does it not match this one? This could be also classified as a right angle in this area here. So these two would be together. Now I'm looking at the opening here. This opening on this triangle, look how much bigger this angle looks. So I can put it with this one because it has a bigger angle. The only one that's going to be by itself in this particular triangle is this one right here. This one right here. It is got an angle that is a little bit smaller than all the others. So we can classify them that way, and we're going to learn some words that we could use to represent those angles in these problems. So let's just review our qualifications for some of the things that we've already discussed. We know that a rectangle has 4 right angles. We also know that it has 2 sets of parallel lines. Those lines are never going to touch. So if we're thinking about the sides, the opposite side, they're never going to touch. They're going to keep going on to infinity and beyond. And then here we have another set of parallel lines, and they're never going to touch. If that line keeps going, it's never going to touch this line that's opposite of it. So rectangles are qualifications for another big word that we use. They're all polygons, but they can be classified as a quadrilateral, like we learned on last Wednesday's lesson. This one is a rhombus. It also has 4 sides, and they do have some parallel lines here that will never touch if they keep going at the angle they're going. And we notice that all the side lengths on a rhombus are equal. So they're considered a quadrilateral, but they are not considered a rectangle because they don't have 4 right angles. A square is also a polygon. It's also a quadrilateral. It has 4 right angles and 4 sides of the same length. So a square is a rectangle, it is a quadrilateral, and it's a polygon. It can also be considered a rhombus because it has the same side lengths, which is the qualification for a rhombus. So a square can be classified as many different things, just like I just said. So we've got to think about what attributes each of them have, and then we can classify them. The next thing that we're going to talk about and just review is the trapezoid. Remember, we talked about how it only has 1 set of parallel sides. And remember, parallel sides are the sides that will never, ever cross. So in this case, trapezoid can be classified as a quadrilateral and also a polygon. Parallelograms are shapes that have 2 pairs of parallel sides. So now we've got all kinds of different classifications. We know that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram as well if it has 2 pairs of parallel sides. So we're thinking about a rectangle right there. Didn't mean to say quadrilateral. I meant to say rectangle. Rectangles have 2 pairs of parallel sides. A rhombus has 2 pairs of parallel sides. A square has 2 pairs of parallel sides. So it's considered a polygon, quadrilateral. It is also considered a parallelogram. So there's many things that we can use to classify those shapes. So you might want to be taking notes here to help you remember those as you're working through your lesson work today. So I would highly recommend you take some notes today. Now, we just saw in the beginning of the lesson what we call triangles. Triangles is a broader word that we can use to describe that 3-sided shape. Now, we're thinking about triangles. We know that it's 3-sided. There's something called vertices, which we learned about in our first lesson. Vertices are where 2 line segments go together. So we're looking here at this point, and this point. So there's 3 vertices in a triangle. We also saw some triangles that had right angles. We saw that some of them had the same side lengths, equal side lengths. Some have side lengths that are not equal, and all of those have words that we use to call those kinds of triangles. And we're going to learn more about those later in regards to their names. In 4th grade, you're really going to be dealing with those names and how those angles, when you learn to measure angles, work with triangles. So we're going to think about how we can classify shapes by looking at all of their attributes. So what I want you to do is just kind of take some quick notes about what those attributes are. So one of the most important things for us when we're classifying shapes is the number of sides, the number of sides they have. We also want to think about the number of parallel sides they have, because we can classify them in more categories than just one based on whether or not they have one, two pairs or no pairs of parallel sides. We also can classify them by the size of their angles, whether they're concave or convex, and some shapes can be classified in more ways than just one, just like I said earlier. For example, a square can be a rhombus and a rectangle. We know it's a polygon. We also know that it's a quadrilateral. So we've got to think about what all attributes each shape has and where we can classify them within groups. So that's all I have for today. Your assignment will be on Google Classroom for you to view and get all of your information. I will be meeting with the Click and Source students only today at 10 a.m. for their multiplication test. So I will see those students there today. If you need help, I should be available throughout the day. I have a meeting this afternoon, but hop on there anyway. Someone should be there to help you. Maybe Miss Pelton will be there if the teachers are not there, because we have meetings today. So we will do our best to be on there to assist you from 12 to 3. So just hop on the whole group meet, and we'll do our best to help you with any assignments that you struggle with. I hope everybody has an awesome day, and I'll see you soon.